Was human civilization a big mistake? Brederick?
Well, I, of course, enjoy stepping back, as we've discussed many times on the program, and considering topics from first principles. And you almost have to pause for a second before you can even answer this. And you have to say, civilization. Interesting. I'm thinking like farming. I'm thinking like governments. I'm thinking like collective.
Domestication of agriculture is included in civilization. Yeah. Or domestication of plants.
I'm thinking. Right. I mean, right. And I mean, it's, you step back and you think about it for a second, and then I come back and I just go, no, I'm in on that. I think it was a good call, and I am very much pro civilization. I don't think it was a bad trade-off. That being said, of course, there are some negative things. I mean, we can go through a whole list, but I am firmly in the camp of civilization was a good innovation for humanity. I'm pro-civilization.
What do you like about it?
I like many things. One of them is just the physical safety that it affords for the vast majority of people for the vast majority of time, as compared to me being out in some African savanna or some like glacial ice age North American, I don't know, Bering Land Bridge situation with like a giant sloth and some saber-toothed tiger. I think that was probably a little bit of a rougher life physically. So physical safety is going to be my number one thing. Yeah.
Despite the awe of being surrounded by Pleistocene megafauna, you would rather take a house with central heating and cooling. All right. What's your second item? The second thing that you like about civilization?
We could go down the list. I mean, I think that...
Just give me your top three.
You know what? My top three, probably that. Well, that for sure is just the safety and the comfort. I think there's a big part there. I think we can kind of loop in like modern medical advances into that kind of thing. I think the next big one for me is actually just connection, technology, and kind of the consistency of communities has allowed us for a lot better connection. You and I are able to stay in connection, even though we live quite far away. Mm-hmm. I was able to stay in connection with friends and family, even though I was living farther away. Or even just this idea of, there's just more stable like cultures and societies. Now, I know some anthropologist is going to say I'm completely out of my rails here, and it was actually much more stable in like, I don't know, Babylon or something like that. But I don't think so. It seems very stable to me, and I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, those are good reasons. I want to say, too, I'm not anti-civilization. I just thought this would be an interesting topic to discuss because a famous University of Michigan grad, Go Blue, has been trending on the internet among the young kids, the Gen Zs, and other people. Let me share my screen so I can show who I'm talking about.
Please do.
Yeah, this is an image of Ted Kaczynski when he was, or otherwise known as the Unabomber, when he was booked. And you can see here he's wearing the Jordan U of M primary coach fitted hat.
Wow.
Loves the Michigan gear. Yeah, this famous University of Michigan grad wrote something called Industrial Society and Its Future. I think he's like what's the right word? Definitive. Like he's the eco-terrorist. He's the person that decided I need to tear this whole thing down, this whole thing that we call industrial civilization. And he seemed to be very unhappy about it. He was a pretty good writer, and he wrote this manifesto. Let me just read. I do not agree with him, but I think this is an interesting sentiment, because we usually don't stop and think about all of civilization being a net negative. But that's kind of what he says. Let me read his introduction here. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. They have greatly increased the life expectancy of those of us who live in advanced countries, but they have destabilized society, have made life unfulfilling, have subjected human beings to indignities, have led to widespread psychological suffering and physical suffering in the third world as well, and have inflicted severe damage on the natural world. The continued development of technology will worsen the situation. It will certainly subject human beings to greater indignities and inflict greater damage on the natural world, and it will probably lead to greater social disruption and psychological suffering, and even to physical suffering in advanced countries. He wrote a lot more, but I think that captures the main idea right there. It seems crazy, and I need to acknowledge here, I conflated all of civilization with industrial civilization.
Sure.
But there are people besides Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, that have challenged all of civilization. Someone told me a story once that the San Bushmen of Southern Africa were invited to come and join civilization, and they looked at it, they were like, nah, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to drive cars and pay for health insurance, and no, we just want to hunt animals and hang out with our buddies and make a fire wherever we want. They are hunter gatherers, right? Like that is how all humans lived pre-civilization. If you define civilization as like domesticating wheat and barley and building ziggurats, or choose your textile and choose your type of pyramid. Not textile, your crop. Choose your crop and choose your type of pyramid and your system of writing, and that's how civilization started. They don't do any of that. So they're a little more wholesome than the Unabomber. They didn't feel this extreme animosity towards industrial civilization. They were just like, we don't need to do that. Were they right?
I have many different thoughts that just popped up in my head. And, I am just going to do what I do sometimes with my wife. Why don't you pick a number 1 or 2? And I'll just go with that one. They're both decent, but...
you know what? Let's do 2.
Okay.
Let's do 2.
So, I am actually going to posit that we don't have a choice but to embrace society and embrace the technological advances that it brings. And that is based purely on a physical safety from other human people example. So there is a very interesting writer out there who I have read over the last several years, a couple of his books, Thomas Sowell. I know all of a sudden, the libtards are just going to laugh as soon as you say his name. I doubt they've read any of his books, though. He has a very interesting paragraph in the book Basic Economics, where in one paragraph he describes why Europeans were able to actually execute colonialism. And it's a fascinating paragraph. I will just paraphrase it, but he basically is like, so when the Europeans showed up on the African continent, they got there in boats that they had like taken from the Greeks in terms of the invention of it. They had guns that was invented with gunpowder from China, and the French kind of refined all this technology, and like he just like goes down this whole list of things, and he's like, and then they showed up against a people that had probably never left like a 5 square mile area. And due to the way that Africa is actually set up, he kind of gives all these like very interesting geological like reasons, like geographical reasons of why they aren't as developed as other countries. Like, and it's not like a Eurocentric worldview, or, because you could like look at like China and the Yangtze River system, right? And it's just like they had no chance against these dudes rolling up because they had horses, they had guns, they had ships, they had supplies, they had reinforcements that would come. And so it's kind of like those are all technological inventions that are facilitated by a civilization type structure. And I think that the reason I'm bringing those up is if you don't do that and you don't embrace that, you're going to be subjugated to the people that do. Cortez is another example where they went into South America and they ended up, just reaping a bunch of harm over there just because they had such superior technology. I mean, it's the story of like all these classic alien invasion movies, right? So maybe you actually don't even have a choice. And the only reason the Bushmen are allowed to do that is because no one has decided to like take them out.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, you may want to adopt technology for your self-interest, but doesn't that almost reinforce at least the thesis of the Unabomber's manifesto, that the increase in technology visits increasing suffering and indignities on
Why don't you
people?
why don't you ask me about my number one? You
Okay,
went
tell
with
me what the
two.
number one is. Tell me what number one is.
Number one is just like the idea of all the advances in society that are actually quite good, like healthcare. That's incredible. One of the things that, and I'm not an expert on this, but I have a family member who is very much into health, and he was talking about life expectancies. And really, a lot of these life expectancy stats from like pre-industrial times where they're like, oh, they only live till 35 and this, that, and the other. If you took out infant mortality and mothers dying in childbirth, the numbers tell a very, very different story. So, like, many people were living into their 80s in like Jesus' time or
Mm-hmm.
Buddha's time or, Mohammed's time. But it's really been to a couple of these like key advances in healthcare or things like civil engineering, which we talked about on the program before, that gave you clean water. It wasn't actually a lot of these, it's like, well, what else was there? And that is the technology. I think that is just a net benefit. I mean, we can get into the whole how it keeps people alive that would probably be better off just passing away. And I say that with personal experience with family members. I'm not being flippant, but like, I think it's a net positive, man.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people agree with you. Me personally, I like civilization. I Every time I have to sleep outside, which is
Yes.
thankfully not too often, it's pretty uncomfortable. And maybe
Yeah.
the pros of being like, wow, I got to see the stars tonight are completely outweighed by the cons when I wake up and have 30 mosquito bites on my face. I like to put moisturizer on my skin when it's dry.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like to order exotic caffeinated drinks from the Orient, right? Matcha latte powder. I mean, I am totally at the, I won't say the apex of civilization, but I'm a beneficiary.
Yeah.
However,
Okay.
I I do see the potential for technology to increase human suffering. And I think that I have seen that with, or we've all kind of seen that with the loneliness epidemic. I know that can be kind of a buzzword, but to put it concretely, um, if your attention is a resource and you direct it all towards your device, you have less of it to invest in other people. And if people's well-being is dependent on human attention, whether it's from your parents, friends, just random people, even taking the time to be friendly and say hi, if that is just kind of sucked away into this gravitational black hole of digital devices, hasn't technology then massively increased human suffering? And the people in the San Bushmen who are just hanging out with their buddies all day. It's like, oh yeah, I got a thorn in my foot, but I hang out with my buddies all day, and I don't get AI psychosis. And dude, this Impala tastes pretty good when I slow cook it.
I'm sure Impala is excellent on a spit over an open fire where you're kind of, with a bunch of your bros, literal bros, figurative bros in the, I guess you'd call it a tribe, probably a clan or a tribe.
Yeah.
I think all those things are totally true. And I think that there's trade-offs. And I think that it is 100% true that we live lonelier lives than we did even 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, even from right before COVID. There are, like, if you look at the meetup culture, for those of us in our audience who don't know, like, meetups was this like whole thing, and they're still out there, but not to the degree that they were before COVID. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure in some municipalities they are, but in a lot of them, the communities just kind of never got back together again. And I agree with you. There are some trade-offs for sure. It's not an obvious yes when you kind of look into some of these, you know, potential negative things. But I think it's important not to get distracted because I think life is that's all life is a set of trade-offs. And I
Right.
think that if you get
You don't have malaria. You don't
you
have
don't have
hookworm.
malaria.
The
You didn't
Mongols
have
are not coming to burn your house down in most of the world, as far as I know.
in most of the world, right? And so I think that there's a trade-off in all those things, but loneliness is tough, man. You got to fight that. You got to be proactive. There are definitely things that we have to worry about as individuals to live healthy and fulfilled lives that the Bosman Bush people, Bushmen, however we want to refer to them, don't worry about. They don't worry about that. They don't worry about not having community and feeling lonely and having
Yeah.
to plan like, hey, I know I get lonely on Saturday afternoons. So, in my single days, I would think like this.
They don't
I
have
was
to go
single
to the
for many
gym
years.
and do what are they called? Like the donkey kicks and single leg deadlifts, and
You don't have to be doing that. You don't
deep
have
squat
to keep track.
holds to correct
Nope.
the long periods of sitting. Yeah,
Nope.
they're fit from life.
You don't have to worry that getting something at the supermarket is actually going to kill you. Like if it's supposed to be food, it's food. And everybody knows what's good for them. And everyone knows, like, don't eat that berry. Don't mess with that snake. But, no one ever tells you don't go and eat too many of the Twinkies. It should be obvious, but it's not. That knowledge is lost. I remember one of the most impactful things that I've ever seen was I lived in Asia for a while in another country. I don't even want to mention it because everyone will say I'm just too much of a fanboy. But I remember watching this documentary, and they were going to some developing country, and they were going through, and there was a very large candy company, which I will not call out, that had a whole advertising campaign in this developing country that like these candy bars actually had like all of these nutrients and were really, really good for their kids. And because this country didn't have regulations, like any sane person would say, this is deeply unethical. Like, what are you doing? A candy bar from time to time is, of course, totally acceptable, but they do not have great nutrients for your kids akin to a banana. Like, come on. And I just remember being floored. And they were interviewing these moms, and I was just like very upset because they'd be like, no, I'm smart. Like I pay attention. Like, don't talk down to me. Yeah. Like I know. Like
I can
I've
read the label.
the literature.
Like the Kit Kat is filled with fiber and protein.
It's got good minerals in there for the kid. And so, that is something that we have to worry about now, that in a pre-technological civilization, everybody kind of knew what was good food and not. And I think that was like a very intimate thing that everybody knew because food was something that everyone was worried about all the time because you didn't want to starve. Now we don't even think about it hardly.
Like I was talking about earlier, where you have this static, this really unpleasant epistemic static where you can't determine the reality or the certitude of anything because it's so abstract or distant, or you don't have the resources to do it. When life was simpler, you didn't have that psychological duress. I mean, you may have had more physical duress and more physical suffering, but you didn't have, my theory at least, is you didn't have as extreme psychological pain, at least of the epistemic variety, right? Even if you go into poke your finger into civilization a bit and get to like a, I don't know, let's take like a medieval village in Poland. I can't remember the title of the book, but I was reading about this book. I didn't read the book, but in the book, it's one of these Jewish villages in, I think it's called like the Pale of Settlement, whatever, the big Jewish communities in Poland, and they would have an argument in this village frequently over whether anything in the world existed outside of Poland. They're like, is Poland the whole world? Is there anything outside of Poland? How do we know? And they they didn't have to answer it necessarily. Imagine how freeing that would be in a way. And then the final thing I'll say there, the point I have by all of that is even though people live in incredible physical comfort in a modern country, like an advanced economy like the United States, people still get so upset they kill themselves, right? Isn't that a sign that there's psychological suffering that can actually outpace the physical suffering that you mitigate? I mean, obviously, we can't measure that as concretely as maybe we would like to get a definitive answer, but that's my theory, at least. I think people can get so unhappy that they are actually in an advanced, physically comfortable country that they are actually worse off than someone that maybe would have had a more stable social system, but they had to live through the nights are cold. Sometimes there's a famine, and some of you children die all the time. I don't know. There's no way to tell, but it's just a theory.
I disagree with you. I think there are ways to tell, and I think that on average, you're probably right. I mean, they have done studies on this where they'll ask people, a lot of it's self-reported, right? Of like, are you less happy? And they always say the richer you get, often countries get less happy, right? But you can even look in the self-harm literature. I mean, suicide rates go up in a lot of these countries if you don't have proper social structures and social cohesive communities. So I guess this one is kind of a mixed bag. I mean, just to kind of wrap this topic up, I am pro-civilization, but it is not a clear yes. But I think that if we live in strong, cohesive communities and you have friends and you have work that is meaningful, which all these things can be engineered in your life. Obviously, there's opportunities, and obviously there are times when things are not going well, but that's all of life. I think that you can engineer a pretty good life, and I would rather be living today with civilization, specifically technological civilization, than not.
Yeah. Well, to wrap this up, the last thing I'll say is the question itself was provocative intentionally. It was human civilization a big mistake? It's too big of a thing to reduce to a simple yes or no question. And the guy we referenced, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, famous Michigan grad, go blue, was insane because he was tortured by the CIA and given giant doses of acid that actually set him off on this journey to want to tear down industrial society. So we were trying to answer a question coined by an insane, famous University of Michigan grad. And the point that we got to is having air conditioning is nice, and medicine, and have friends, and it's really complicated. So simple questions don't have simple answers. That's all I got.